This week we're going to learn about potentiometers. So to start with, we need to set up our TinkerCad as we've done before. Go ahead and name it potentiometer and LED. Go ahead and set up an LED circuit. We've done that enough now. You should be able to do that without any problem. And then drag a potentiometer onto your board. So in order to wire a potentiometer, we need to have power on one side. So let's go 5 volts there, and we'll make that red. And we need to have ground on the other side. So let's hook that there, make that black. And then we need to have use an analog pin for this because it's going to have a variable input. So we're going to hook that to A0. And we can make that yellow. All right, so that's all we need to do for setup this week. Go ahead and click on code and make sure you're in text. Remember, if you're in blocks, just go ahead and click the text and it'll bring you to this text box. So there's a few things that we're going to go over this week. We're going to learn how to use this serial monitor down here, and we're going to learn how to read a potentiometer and map it to a number that the LED will work with. So while we're talking about the LED, make sure that your LED output is on one of these numbers that has the little squiggly line in front of it. That means that is a PWM pin, which means pulse width modulation. And we'll go over that here in just a little bit. Basically what we're going to do this week is we're going to be able to dim and brighten an LED using the values of our potentiometer. So the potentiometer is just a resistor. It's a variable resistor, so it will have several values between one side and the other. So if we hit our simulation, even with nothing coded in, when we turn this, you can see that it turns like a knob. So that's what we're going to be working with this week. So stop your simulation. So to start coding, the first thing we want to do is see what values we're getting from this potentiometer. So we're going to use this serial monitor to read what we're getting. So go up to your void setup, and in between your curly brackets, we're going to start our serial port. So we're going to say serial.begin, and then we're going to do our parentheses, and we're going to set a rate. So it's 9600 is the rate we're going to use. That's the speed that the serial port is talking back and forth with your Arduino. And don't forget to end your sentence with a semicolon. Then down here in void loop, we're going to, actually before we do that, let's go ahead and set up our pins. So we're going to do hashtag define. Let's try hashtag define. And then we're going to name our pin. So we'll have an LED pin, and that in my case is on pin 9. And let's make sure I can actually hit hashtag. That would be 3. There we go. All right, then we're going to do another pin. We're going to define for our potentiometer. So let's call that pot, and we're going to put that on, in my case, A0. Make sure that's a capital A, and then A0. Okay, so we've set our potentiometer and we've set our LED pins. So once we have our pins defined, let's go ahead and set up a variable that we're going to use later. So we'll call that an int, which is an integer, which is just a number, and we'll call this pot reading. And then we're going to set that equal to 0 and end it with a semicolon. Okay, so that's a variable. That's how we do a variable. We've gone over that before. So let's go down here into the void setup, and let's go ahead and set our pin modes. So pin mode, and then we're going to set LED, which is our LED variable, and we're going to set that as an output. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing with our potentiometer pin, and we're going to set that as an input. All right, this is all stuff we've gone over before, so it shouldn't be new to you. All right, so once we have those set up, we're going to go down here into the void loop, and I'm going to show you how to use the serial monitor. So let's do first, let's say pot reading, which is our variable that we set up before, equals, and then let's do an analog read. Make sure we're capitalizing it where I capitalize it, and we're going to analog read pot, the pot pin, and end that with a semicolon. So every loop through this thing, we're going to be reading the analog number on the pot, which is what we will put in here. So once we've done that, then we want to write that number out to the serial monitor. So we're going to say serial dot print ln, and then we're going to say pot reading. Okay, and that with a semicolon. All right, so we should be able to see what's going on our potentiometer now once we start our simulation. So let's go and open the serial monitor by clicking on it, and then let's hit start simulation, and you'll see that we have a 1023 showing up. Okay, that's the highest number that an analog pin will input. So we have a 1023 on this side. If we take our potentiometer and spin it around, you can see those numbers varying, and then we should get all the way down to 0 on this end. So we have a number between 0 and 1023 to work with here. All right, so what we have to understand, let's go ahead and stop our simulation. When we use PWM, which is a pulse of 5 volts to 0 volts, and it goes at a certain speed, that speed is between 0 and 255. So when that speed of that pulse is at 0, there's no light coming through the LED. But if that's pulsing at 255, that's going to be the brightest that the LED is going to be. So any number in between that will give us a dimmer or brighter condition. So the problem that we have is we have 1023 that we're reading off our potentiometer, and we need a number between 0 and 255. So we're going to use what's called a map function for that. So let's go down here into our void loop, and we're going to say pot reading equals, and we'll say map. So we're going to map this number, and then we're going to say pot reading again, and then we're going to put a comma, and then we're going to say 0 to 1023, and we're going to map that from 0 to 255, and end that with a parenthesis and a semicolon. All right, so what we should get now is we should get the new reading on our pot should be between 0 and 255. I'm going to move this stuff around just a little bit to make it more readable. So what's going to happen is we're going to read the pot, then we're going to map that to 0 to 255, and then we're going to print it out on our serial monitor down here at the bottom. All right, so let's see if that works. So let's go ahead and start our simulation. And you'll now see that our highest number that we have here is 255. And then if we turn this, it'll be numbers between 255, and it's proportional to the original, which was 0 to 1023. So now we have something we can work with that will give us an analog reading that we can use to set to our potentiometer. Okay, so now that we have all that working correctly, let's go ahead and write in the stuff that we need for our LED. So come down here into our loop, and we're going to analog write, and then we want to set our LED pin, and then we want to set that pin to the value that we're getting from our potentiometer, which is, in this case, pot reading. So like I said before, we can name that anything we want, but that just made sense to me. And then close that with a parenthesis and a semicolon, and let's see what happens now when we start our simulation. All right, so we have 255, and you can see that my LED is on full bright. When we turn it down, it should dim down. You can see it getting dimmer, and you can see it getting dimmer, and when we're all the way down to 0, it's all the way off. Okay, so that's all we have to do to be able to use a potentiometer to dim and brighten an LED. Don't forget, when you're done with this circuit, to put your name, the date, and the course that you're in, and submit it the way we've done in the past, and please do it by this Friday.